Hi guys, welcome back or welcome to DreamWorks Switch to Life. And for today's video, we are going to be celebrating the release of Chicken Run 2 Dawn of the Nugget by reviewing one of DreamWorks' earliest movies, Chicken Run 1, which is actually not really a DreamWorks movie. It's a collaboration between Aardman Animations and DreamWorks. However, since the two companies split up, this essentially means that Aardman Animation owns the rights to the characters and any stories and sequels that would follow, while DreamWorks Animation only owns the distribution rights to the very first movie. So, technically a DreamWorks movie, but at the same time, not. So the second movie is just barely released today on Netflix, so I will be making a review of it, but in the meantime, let's talk about the very first movie. And this movie is really great and amazing. It has some of the best stop motion animation ever, and probably the best at the time that it was being made. In fact, this was actually DreamWorks' highest grossing movie at the time of its release. It was eventually surpassed by the first Shrek movie, but believe it or not, it is still the highest grossing stop motion film of all time. Yes, that's even including inflation. There is sadly one aspect of the movie that I think could be seen as a negative, and that is the characters' designs. They don't really look like real chickens, but I honestly think they look amazing. Sure, I grew up with them, but still, I thought that they got the point across. These guys actually are chickens. They have really nice beaks, and the plumage on these guys is amazing. Yes, they may have made the plumage seem like their clothes, but still, it made these guys seem a bit more human, while at the same time, they still came across as normal chickens. I hear that one of the best parts of this movie was its voice acting, and I have to agree. Oftentimes, I would find myself quoting this movie over and over again just so I can find the perfect British accent. Seriously, I just loved the voice acting in this movie, and the dialogue was written very, very well, especially because there are like so many British words in this movie. I have no idea what they mean, but I know what they mean.
Poppycock!
There's also the music for this movie, which is really good. I just loved it. And that's not even going into the story of this movie. It's basically a bunch of chickens trying to escape a communist camp. Or rather, the chicken farm is basically a communist camp, and they get into a bunch of shenanigans, which I really loved because it just makes the characters grow closer together in meaningful ways that actually seem realistic. This movie also has one of the scariest villains that I've ever seen in a DreamWorks movie just because of how much intimidation Mrs. Tweety gives off. Now, unfortunately, I'm afraid we're gonna have to dive into spoilers, but since this movie is 23 years old at this point, I'm not going to go into much spoilers, and I highly recommend that you do watch this movie, especially because both it and the sequel are currently streaming on Netflix. So after a bunch of failed attempts to escape the farm, our main character, Ginger, comes up with the plan to go over the fence instead of under it like they did last time, which was actually a really smart idea, except for the fact that they don't really have a means of going over the fence until an American rooster going by the name of Rocky Rhodes ends up flying into the chicken farm, but in the process, there's a crash landing that results in him breaking his arm. So, with no other choice, Ginger asks him to train all of the chickens to fly, and while at first he decides to abandon them, he ends up being forced to stay with them just so that they can hide him from the people who are hunting him, which is a circus show where he actually is part of the circus act. And by hiding with them, he ends up training them. He can't fly himself due to his broken wing, but he can teach them how to fly. At least that's what he says. So the chickens are flapping about aimlessly until eventually Mrs. Tweedy, the farm's owner, comes up with the plan to turn all of the chickens from egg layers into pies.
Ooh, what kind of pies? Apple. My favorite.
After seeing how much devastation that this farm does to all the chickens, Rocky decides to help out by lifting up their spirits, and in the process, he accidentally reveals that his wing has actually healed and he can fly now, supposedly. And then there's a test run of the machine where Ginger and Rocky end up sabotaging it so that they can buy the chickens time enough to learn how to fly. But unfortunately, what they don't know is that Rocky actually can't fly. All he knows how to do is be shot out of a cannon, and that's how he's able to fly with the circus. Unfortunately, that also means that all of their hopes are crushed. Rocky ends up leaving just so he doesn't have to see the hurt on their faces when they realize the truth. And then Fowler ends up revealing that he was part of the RAF.
What exactly is the RAF?
What do you mean, what is it? The Royal Air Force is what?
Thanks to him, they can actually build a plane out of their huts so that they can actually fly outside of the farm. But in the process, they end up being discovered by the Tweedies, which ends up leading to a really awesome final battle, including where Rocky, after feeling guilty for abandoning the chickens, finally shows up to help them escape. And he actually succeeds, and so the Tweedies are defeated after an epic final battle, which was really cool to watch, and thus the chickens are free to live about in their own little paradise after the movie. Now, that review was a bit short, but honestly, this movie is so good and definitely worth watching. This might just be the nostalgia I have for this movie, but I have zero problems with it. This movie hit every note. Beautiful scenery and animation. It has great music, great voice acting, well-written dialogue, memorable characters. Everything about this movie was perfect. There was even some great humor coming from the rats, who don't really do much in this movie, but they're part of it. Honestly, it makes sense why this movie is the highest grossing stop-motion animated film of all time because it's just so good. I gotta say, it is probably the best Aardman Animations project ever. So why did it take them so long to come out with the sequel? Well, I'm just gonna say it. They probably thought that this was good as a one-time film, and they had no intentions of there ever being a sequel. However, a good story presented itself, there was fan demand, and eventually work began, and of course, stop motion is a very, very grueling and time-consuming task when compared to normal animation, where you can usually pump out a film in 3 years, but in this case, you need at least 6, maybe 7 years just to create one movie. If that doesn't tell you how much time and dedication went into making this movie, then I don't know what will. So honestly, this movie was really great and definitely worth watching. It's perfect, and while it might be a bit dark, that honestly just adds to what makes it so great and amazing. I honestly cannot wait to watch the sequel, and I hope that you guys do, because my review will be coming out next week. So make sure that you like and subscribe so you can stay up to date on all things DreamWorks. But most important of all, make sure that you're staying safe out there, and I will see you all in my next video. But until then, bye-bye.
Git face. Pillock. Thinks he's such a big shot because he's got his name on a poster. Showbiz folk are all the same.
The rats are the stars.
Yeah,
really,
yeah, they are. Of course they are.
But
We
he
do
does
all the
get all
hard
the
work.
birds.
He gets all the credit.
He gets everything,
Yes,
doesn't
he
he?
does everything.
You said it, mate.
I know.